your time on this planet has been rather remarkable. All the love and the suffering, the madness, the meaning, the mystery. Tell me, my friend, where did your story begin? If you believe there's a spark of divinity within you, some form of soul or soulful essence that exists meaningfully beyond your flesh, then when did that spark first start to shine? If you want to avoid religious sentiment entirely, then consider the question of consciousness. At what moment did you first achieve sentience as a human being? These kinds of questions can seem far too metaphysical and abstract and irrelevant, honestly, when it comes to our everyday mental health concerns. But I would argue that their significance should not be underrated. Regardless of your spiritual beliefs, it is safe to say that the blank slate does not exist. We didn't escape from our mother's legs with zero knowledge or experience of the world that we're about to enter into. Multiple decades of research in the clinical embryology and prenatal psychology fields have revealed the extent to which babies meaningfully interact with the world around them while inside of their mother's womb. This research has revealed the gravity and the significance of how the conditions of conception, carryment, and birth meaningfully impact our life trajectory far more than we'd dare to believe. So, in this first episode of Inner Work Essentials, I want to open up windows to the womb. Specifically, two major themes within the prenatal psychology literature. Firstly, how the good womb and bad womb environments imprint upon our perceptual reality at both the epigenetic and emotional level. And secondly, how some of the research and interesting findings within the therapeutic space are showing how people can re-access birth memories in altered states of consciousness in an attempt to rediscover and resolve and clear out those unconscious blockages which we never knew we had. Like most people, I cannot recall very much of my life at all before the age of 3, let alone the first crucial 9 months of my life, which we curiously don't include in that age, when we were fundamentally building our entire nervous system and physical emotional reality inside of a living creature called our mother. It's shocking that we don't pay enough attention to this, because those first experiences resonate inside of our bodies over the course of our lifetime. Prenatal psychology teaches us that babies, even fetuses, unborn babies, can store their in utero experiences at deep levels of unconscious memory. To summarize a complex field in short, the way that we are held in the womb will impact the way that we enter into the world. While we're inside of our mothers, we're learning about the way they breathe, the way that they live, the way that they love, the environment they find themselves in. And for better or for worse, those experiences become the flesh and blood of our reality. The book that I'm drawing upon, well, I'm drawing upon 3 books, but the main book that I'm drawing upon for this video is this god-awfully covered Welcoming Consciousness. The first of the Inner Work Essentials. This is the core text that teaches you basically far more than I can share in a single video, and if you're looking for a follow-up book that isn't an essential, Windows to the Womb. Back to the main point. One of the things that I see within inner work, which is why I'm starting with embryology, is that people do inner child work with earnest intentions to re-access a younger part of themselves and clear up energetic blockages and disturbances. They'll start researching things like attachment theory, developmental psychology, and things like intergenerational transmission of trauma. But because memory only takes us up to about the age of 4 or 5, we overlook, unintentionally, that younger period, and especially the in utero period, when our building blocks were really being established. It's not the worst thing to happen We can get a lot out of working with who we were at age 5 or age 6, and we can get a lot out of hopefully contacting our mothers and learning who we were at that time and the kinds of things that we were experiencing. But if we want deep healing, we need to understand the consequences and the lifelong effects of growing inside of a living system. Again, this is our mother. Our mother was a living being. Hopefully she still is a living being. If she's with you or not with you, she's a living being, right? Babies aren't made inside of factories, at least not yet. It's only 2022. Maybe in 30 years they will be. Babies are made inside of organisms. And depending on the cellular quantity and quality of energetic resources within that organism, that's going to dictate who we become. There are some really interesting studies that I found about alcohol, of course, and sedatives, and caffeine being one example, where the half-life of caffeine inside of a mother is 4 hours, but inside of the baby, it's 4 days. Fetal alcohol syndrome is a tragic example of how substance abuse and substance ingestion, basically, can really destroy the potential of a child. But it goes deeper than substances. It's the energetic reality. There's some really interesting stories, again, in this book, Welcoming Consciousness, where children are basically recalling the hostility of the environment where mothers weren't safe, where there was an abuse in the family, or where the mother didn't want the child, or there was a failed abortion. That baby remembers. That baby stores the hostility as a restriction, and if the substances are coming in either chemically or emotionally, which take away from the opportunity of an autonomous and excited emergence into life, even if the sensations are limited because still it's a newborn. I'm not trying to say that a baby has the same level of consciousness at a certain way of labeling consciousness. They do it a different way. That a baby has a level of consciousness which is equivalent to us as adults. But that trajectory has started and continued through parenting or lack of parenting. And until we interrupt that pattern, the intergenerational trauma that we received, either through anxiety, hostility, or neglect, will continue to live in that younger part of ourselves. This is why attachment theory really points us towards the origins. Inner child work gets us a little bit closer, but embryology and prenatal psychology is the best place to begin if you're looking to take it to that next depth with your introspection. I'm gonna go ahead and be rather presumptuous and assume that because you're still watching this weird video about embryology and inner work, then you're interested in reaccessing your birth memories, or at least learning what the possibilities might be. Generally speaking, if you're someone who is interested in reaccessing in utero stage, you're probably interested in the transpersonal. You've maybe dabbled in past life stuff, you've maybe dabbled in extrasensory spiritual realms to one degree or another, or perhaps, more literally, you know that you had a difficult childhood. You might not know the conditions of the early years, but maybe you've heard stories of a difficult labor. Maybe you're like me and you were an emergency cesarean. Maybe you came out premature. Maybe. And the birth memory direct re-experiencing is the turning of that question mark into a full stop. It also brings up a hell of a lot of subjectively challenging emotions. I think the best way of going about this kind of transpersonal inner work is to take a Jungian approach of active imagination to begin with and try and imagine what it would be like, or tap into that intuitive sense of being in the womb. But a better option is to work with someone who's skilled, to work with a trained prenatal psychologist who can guide you through alternative states of consciousness, which are normally hypnotic states, into that realm is probably the best. You're in a container. Unfortunately, best conditions aren't regular conditions. If you're anything like me, you might start spontaneously accessing these memories. The first time that I got a glimmer of what it was like to be a newborn was about 3 years ago. Actually, 3 years to the date. It's the second week of February right now, and the second week of Feb is when I have a lot of emergent experience. That's a personal story. I started to get dreams coming through 3 years ago of being a newborn infant who wouldn't take to my mother's breast. I was never breastfed, and I woke up from this dream in the middle of the night feeling like it was one of those big dreams, you know, those more real than real dreams where the terror was very visceral. And I kept getting repeating dreams like this out of nowhere. I hadn't read anything on the topic, but that feeling of abandonment, that feeling of not being welcome fully or not being cared for fully and being scared, they started to emerge, and I didn't have any sense to wrap around it, which is why, again, I'd recommend firstly reading about this information, secondly, if you're interested, finding someone you can work with, but thirdly and finally, knowing that birth memories, although they are important and although embryology is a fascinating study into the unconscious realms and our psychosomatic unconscious especially, don't rush this work if you're not ready. It can be very difficult, especially if it was a toxic womb environment or a traumatic birth environment. Please take your time. But I want you to know that the possibility is there, and if that's all I get across in this video, just the invitation to look towards an earlier period of memory which conventional science and conventional psychology says is forgotten, you might get somewhere new in your inner work. And of course, that's the point of Inner Work Essentials, to get somewhere new and to get somewhere deeper. So if you've enjoyed this video, this first episode, then click on over to the second video where we're going to talk about self-initiation, rites of passage, and sacred space. Basically, everything you need to do inner work by yourself.